Hi everyone, Eagle here. I want to put together my own aiming guide for the game because I felt that there is a lot of different layers to how people are putting shots together, and you can break it down into several steps to make somewhat of progression for new players to follow. Because you can build yourself up from learning one particular technique and then expanding it onto another technique and finally getting yourself in a position where you know where your shots are going to land before you really even aim. But to get to that level, it's important to understand the basics, and I'd say that the most basic and fundamental idea in Never Online is this idea of head height. Now this line you'll see on your screen now, it has an aiming reticle in the very center of my screen, but it has this green line that runs all the way around it. And you see this line intersects my head, my teammate's head, but also my opponent's head. I have my camera set up that when I move, I don't need to worry about up or down at all. I only really need to worry about left and right. So I can aim at my opponent, and I can just shoot left and right. I don't really need to aim anywhere near them. Like if I aim all the way over here and just pull my cursor right and left over their head, just basically drawing a line, I can get headshots that way. Even if I don't aim near them, as long as I'm close enough and follow this idea of head height, I can spray a gun along where his head's gonna be, even when he moves. And this is why assault rifles in this game with a high rate of fire are so good. Because you combine them with something like assault rifle level 2, and they've got a very low level of recoil, they've got a good reload speed, they kill in a decent distance, and you can essentially just set yourself to have a steel platform where you can spray someone down. Now as you can see, I'm spraying quite a lot there, not doing a lot to control my shots, and that's essentially the first step. It's getting yourself where you can get yourself at head height, and just sort of spray yourself around and just kind of get that headshot. But as we build ourselves up, the shots are going to get more and more precise, but this is the starting point, is getting it so your camera's on the right height. You don't need to worry about aiming up or aiming down, but only on left and right axes. Now I'm going to do a run of a couple training dummies here and try and point out that even though I'm not exactly aiming directly at someone, is that I start to aim and I autocorrect left and right over them and spray quite a lot of bullets at them. So these shots are quite grouped up in the way I'm shooting them, and you're still able to land headshots this way. But one of the downsides to this method of aiming is it uses a lot of bullets because you are holding down the trigger and going full auto. So I'm going to show you exactly what I'm doing here. So you notice how whenever I first aim at this dummy, this is me on the first frame. I'm pressing L1. You can see on the controller here that this is where on my screen I've pressed it. I'm not actually aiming at the dummy. And then as I realise that I'm nowhere near, I just start holding down R1 and I just draw a line through their head. And as that happens, they get shot. And the same again is going to happen here. I start holding down L1, I'm not actually aiming at them. I realise that and I just start drawing a line straight through them. And this is one of the ways you can aim, is you don't really need to be all that accurate, as long as you're sort of riding at head height. Because you see here I'm sort of close and I sort of have to autocorrect. And I just start holding down R1 as I'm autocorrecting these shots and just pulling my camera to the left and right. This is how a lot of players aim without even realising it, is they sort of get kind of close with head height and they autocorrect their camera left and right while holding down R1 with a fully automatic weapon and try and manage that recoil.
Ninja, it's all you. كم واحد باقي؟
So this footage was taken from NINJA-MGS's plays during the rescue tournament. So this is a very high stakes situation. You know, his whole team is dead. He has to kill everyone. And let's look at how he actually manages to do this. So he's going to get chased. You can see that someone's coming out to try and shoot him. And he aims, and he's not near them. And what does he do? He starts pulling his camera to the right as he's holding R1. Now we get to see one of the weaknesses here of this strategy is that gun shoots, and then as he's in line with the head, the gun isn't shooting, and he pulls past, and then the gun fires again. This is something to be aware of when you do try and drag your cursor over someone's head, is that bullets can miss because of the firing rate of the gun. And we can see that they adapt immediately to the fact they didn't die by re-aiming and just getting any shot on them at all. So once they're dead, he starts retreating and he catches sight of another enemy. And look how quickly he reacts here. He starts bringing around the camera and he gets somewhat close. And look, he immediately starts pulling his camera left and right. And he actually grabs him. There's someone else here, so he starts reorienting himself, getting as close as he can, and his aiming is all the way over here. And he starts pulling his camera over, just spraying left and right over people, but it still kills him. You see how effective this actual style of aiming is that whenever he started to aim, it wasn't close to him, but then he auto-corrected as he played and made up for that. And this type of playstyle, this type of aiming is really, really good in high stakes situations because you're not always able to pre-aim at someone. You're not always going to have the time to do that. But auto-correcting left and right using head height is extremely effective because you can just basically set yourself up to headshot in a very quick way. The next step, I would say, after learning head height is figuring out how to aim close to someone, autocorrect, and then put out precision shots. Now guns like the AK are known for a very high rate of recoil. If you try and spray with this gun like you would at M4, you're going to find it's a lot harder to get those shots to connect. That's why a lot of people who use the AK actually fire in a very controlled manner where they tap the firing button. Some people call this AK tapping, but generally it's just the same idea of trying to use some sort of trigger discipline to just control how many bullets you're shooting from the gun. So I'd say that trying to figure out how to aim as close as you can to someone, getting onto their head, and then, you know, adjusting and shooting them with singular shots. But if you miss, so you can just tap the button again. This isn't quite as hard as shooting single shot weapons because even if you miss, you can just shoot another shot again. But because you aren't able to spray the gun, it's a little bit harder than spraying with the M4. So similar to before, I'm going to do a run through of the dummies. And you can see how whenever I aim at them, I'm just taking very small shots. I'm only tapping the trigger maybe once, twice, or 3 times. Because if I miss, I can just simply correct a little bit and shoot again. This is basically how people try to use the AK if they're going for that AK tapping style. So just like before, we're going to analyze exactly how this is looking whenever we're aiming and shooting. So you see I get in the position here, and when I aim, I'm not near their head. In fact, I'm not even on head height. But you see, I manually pull my aim up, and I fire a singular shot. One shot, and I tap again. The second shot might have been the one that killed him, but I think it was just a travel time of the first. So you see I wasn't sure if I got him, and I tap a couple times before I start to move again. So you can see how this precision type of shooting. So you see him starting to aim, and I'm not near them again. I haven't pre-aimed the shot. And I start to move, and I fire a singular shot. In fact, I tap R2 twice and shoot 2 bullets. So you see how this coordinated, precise style of aiming. So I start to aim, I'm not near him, and I drag myself along head height. I fire once here, and I miss him. I realise I miss, and I start to reorient myself, pull it over a bit, and fire the second shot, which gets him. So I'm not spraying here, I'm firing singular bullets every time. And I'm either reacting to the fact I haven't hit, or I'm guessing I haven't hit and I go for another shot.
Pretty darn good.
Oh, I'm really sorry.
Okay.
So same as before, we're going to examine this footage. So it's a very rare situation here, is that a teammate has been grabbed and put into a CQC hold, and they pretty much have them in a hostage situation. If you try and spray shoot, like you would if at M4 in this particular scenario, you would shoot your own teammate, so the shot has to be precise. So you can see that they try to aim and get the shot as close as possible, and then shooting their teammate. They get SOP locked, and because they have it in their head, they're still like doing precision shots. They just do tap firing to everyone they see. But you see how they're shooting very controlled shots, and Vamp is, Vamp's alive, and 3 people got killed there. I would say for most players, the third step in a progression to learning how to aim very, very well in Nail Gun Online is figuring out a sort of indication for knowing that before they press L1 to aim, like before they fire the gun at all, they know their bullets are going to hit. In the first example of spraying left and right with an M4, we weren't aiming directly at the dummy when we were firing, we were aiming close and then auto-correcting, spraying at head height. In the next example of using AK tapping, we're aiming close to the dummy, but then we're auto-correcting it and then firing. With this, if you can try and figure out how to get your shots to land as close as possible without needing to touch the right stick at all, you'll improve greatly. Now I know personally from my character, is that if the enemy's head intersects my right ear muffler, it's going to be a headshot. And in general, if your opponent's head is over your right shoulder, I'm trying to set this up where you can see, if they're over your right shoulder like this, it's going to be a headshot. And this is a single shot weapon, so you can see how I'm only firing one shot and it's immediately a headshot before I use the aiming reticle at all. So you see how I'm getting it pretty much every time, or at least extremely close. And that's because I know that if their head's over my right shoulder or intersecting my right ear or the ear muffler itself, I've got a headshot. Let's do a run through the dummies. Now I'm going to try and get my aim as close to the dummy every time I shoot and get it to be a pre-aim shot. It's not going to happen every time because it is very difficult, but for the most part we're only shooting singular shots and we're doing our best to not miss anything. And with a gun like the SVD, you can't afford to miss. So let's actually try and analyze this and see just how close I get when I'm trying to do this. So you see I'm actually way off, and this is me trying to use either the center of my screen or the right muffler or the right shoulder to line up shots, and I'm still this far off. But I can still only kill them in a singular bullet, which is still quite good. So we're going to try and see if I can line up the next one with the shoulder, so it's over the right shoulder, and there we go. You see how close it is? This is the sort of stuff you'll be aiming to do as much as possible, is before you aim, you've got a good idea of where the camera is going to be. And yeah, that time is pretty much perfect. That time's pretty much good as well. So you can see how when things are to your weapon side, it's actually easier to aim, as opposed if they're going to be on your left hand side instead. So let's take a look at this footage from Solid 77's stream. And there's going to be a lot going on here that we talked about already in the video, so let's bring this up a bit. So he's coming around this corner, and because the target's on his left hand side, it's actually harder to orient his position. But you see how he's trying to line up his character's shoulders? He's still a little bit off, but he's able to move as he's aiming and make it one fluid motion to where he's moving and aiming all in one go. And he's pretty much shooting immediately on the head. As soon as he fires a shot, he stops aiming, he reorients himself again, and look how close he gets again. He knows exactly when he presses L1 starts firing where his bullets are going to land, and 2 times in a row he's essentially right on their head. So he's pre-aimed those first 2 shots, he comes over to the target, and what happens here is the guy's coming around the corner, and he starts aiming and gets over the enemy's right shoulder, and he pulls his camera across, basically shooting in a line to spray fire at him. Then he comes round, and see him again, he begins aiming, and he pulls his camera across and shoots. So this is a combination of all of the things we talked about in the video so far. He's spraying left and right to get shots, he's using a combination of burst fire, and he's pre-aiming shots as well. This is a combination of everything we've talked about encapsulated in one clip. You may have noticed by now that all of the information so far has been running under a singular assumption that both players are on even ground, meaning that they'll be the same height. But what happens if the other player is crouching? You think the answer may be to aim down to match, and that can work. But I find a more feasible solution if you're trying to maintain your camera is if the opponent crouches, you crouch too, because it brings your head in line with their head. You see how I'm not even moving my right analog stick, and it's bringing it in line? In fact, let's bring up the overlay just to show that even when I'm aiming at this height, if they crouch and I crouch, because the characters have the same crouching animation, that it still preserves head height. Once you've gotten to a level where you can pre-aim using your camera against opponents who are on the same elevation as you, you'll start to realise that you can pre-aim with the camera against most targets. I would still recommend using head heights to set up a lot of your shots in the same elevation as you, but against separate elevations you can pre-aim against opponents and really start to open yourself up on where you can shoot. Once you've gotten the hang of this, your skills as a player will really start to come into its own, and you can apply this knowledge to essentially any weapon.